All right, everybody, welcome back to Fan2Fan Podcast. I am one of your hosts and drivers for our continuation of this episode, and we'll talk about that in a second. I'm Doug, and I'm going to reintroduce some of our other hosts. We've got Bernie Gonzalez and our special guest host, Andrew Murray. And as we're driving today, we may have some additional people that we pick up along the way. But if you remember, last episode, we began our RV road trip across horror America. So we started in the Northeast, we started in New England, worked our way through, made a little bit of a turn into the Midwest, and we ended up in Ohio with Nightmare on Elm Street. So if you haven't heard that episode, stop and go listen to the episode before this. But we're going to continue on our road trip. And actually, I think I went a little too far into the country. So I'm going to make a U-turn because I did make a wrong turn. And we're going to take ourselves back into West Virginia. Don't laugh at me, Andrew. We're going to take ourselves back into West Virginia, and we're going to kick this thing off with Wrong Turn. So, Andrew, I'm going to start with you on this one. Is this a horror movie?
Well, yeah, Wrong Turn is absolutely a horror film. It's, in the same vein as The Hills Have Eyes. It's just set in Appalachia. But I feel that it's not the right horror movie for West Virginia, because West Virginia to me is with having a lot of focus on the location of West Virginia, I think the Mothman Prophecy is a much better fit, because the Mothman is a local legend within West Virginia. It's really tied to the area. I couldn't think of a better movie to really kind of give this state its own official horror film. So you're throwing Wrong Turn out the window. Bernie, I'm gonna ask you real quick. Should we continue with Wrong Turn, or are we gonna officially anoint the Mothman Prophecies as the horror movie of West Virginia?
Andrew's right. Mothman Prophecies has a massive legacy, especially in the region. It's considered I think he's considered a cryptid in kind of like that mythology, urban legend vein as the Chupacabra or Sasquatch and things like that. But I think even a good movie that has Richard Gere, Laura Linney, Will Patton, Deborah Messing, and has a really good third act that's actually pretty suspenseful on a suspension bridge. That's as funny as I can get, bringing in bridge humor. But yeah,
we will add the laugh track.
Thank you. Hopefully that bridge will connect. But I don't know. I think we have to stick to the map. And maybe we have to do an episode on urban legends and cryptids, which of course Mothman Prophecies would have to feature in. But I think we stick to Wrong Turn, which, to be fair, I don't know that there's much to talk about. I feel in one of the previous episodes, Andrew was really good about talking about Rob Zombie, and we talked a little bit about Devil's Rejects and House of a Thousand Corpses, and I feel like Wrong Turn is kind of like the Nickelodeon version of Rob Zombie, where they try to do this. Kids on the Appalachian Trail get caught up, they're lost in the woods, and they happen to take this, wrong turn, and the people who live there, who have this sort of cannibalistic, and I say this in kind of like that Hills Have Eyes idea, where they're like survivalists, but maybe they're backwoods type folks who are more like hunters. They try to hunt these kids down. So if you think of Rob Zombie, if he was airing on Nickelodeon, that's what Wrong Turn is. And I think there's been like 6 sequels, so they obviously just keep going in circles, these poor kids. But I don't know that Wrong Turn is very memorable, and all things being equal on the map, Andrew's right. Mothman Prophecies is a better movie to talk about, but we're on the wrong turn.
So I know in horror, the casts are always some of the most beautiful casts, right? It's kind of a thing. Slasher movies, horror movies, you always have the absolute prettiest people that in real life you're looking at and you're like, these people are never going camping. If anything, they're going glamping. So I look at, because like Eliza Dushku is one of my personal favorites. Was a huge fan of hers in Buffy and then beyond. I've always been a fan of hers from Bring It On, and just so I can't say anything bad about her. But everybody else in this is just, they're all too pretty to be in this movie that just bludgeons them, and you know, it's supposed to be a horror movie. I never understood why you take the prettiest people in the world and you know, mess with them.
Now, as our guest, Andrew, have you seen? I'm assuming you've seen Wrong Turn.
Oh yes.
Have you seen the sequels?
I have stopped at the sequels. The first Wrong Turn was enough of a wrong turn for me.
Was it memorable to you at all? Like,
honestly, it was really cookie cutter. Like, I've seen Wrong Turn after both Hills Have Eyes. It just felt like it's kind of like an Appalachia ripoff. It didn't really have anything else to add to, you know, the story that was set there. And, you know, it's like story is the most important thing when it comes to these types of films. Like, I mean, if you were to pair it to a double feature around Halloween, of course I'd watch it again, but it's just, yeah, it's not even worth the stop in my book.
You're such a, all right, then we're going to continue through.
If you're going to watch a movie, go watch like The Hitcher, go watch Duel, go watch something like that. That's more interesting. Like, I'd put Wrong Turn in like the same version as like Joyride with the late Paul Walker. You know, those are movies that were just like, again, TBS at like 2 a.m. type movies. Wrong Turn is like Sci-Fi Channel at 2 a.m. on like a Sunday when you just like, there's no reason to watch what's on TV.
There's a single episode in X-Files that is Wrong Turn, and it blows it out of the water at home.
with the family, right? The
cannibalistic family.
Yes.
You just watch that, call it Wrong Turn, and you'll feel much better about yourself.
There you go.
I think, Bernie, I got to say, you guys have done so much Sci-Fi Channel bashing. We're going to have to do an episode on the Sci-Fi Channel and pay homage to it, because there have been some good things that have come out of the sci-fi, but I digress. We're not going to hit into that right now. We're going to continue on our road trip, and we are going back a little east. We're going to get into Virginia, and we're going to get into Virginia with a 2013, so a more recent movie, Mama. Definitely a horror movie. Bernie, I want to start with you on this one. Talk to me about Mama.
I don't know that much on this one. I saw it, and I remember it was produced by Guillermo del Toro, and I think it was part of his effort to bring in more South American Latinx talent to produce more movies, and then obviously play around with a lot. You know, we talk about Mothman prophecies and cryptids and urban legends. You know, the idea of like the woman in white, which in like Spanish culture is La Llorona, the idea of like this crying woman dressed in white that has this sort of lamentation because something terrible has happened to her. Mama kind of brings in some of those ideas, some of that urban legend. But again, like I remember seeing it, and it didn't make much of an impression on me. So Guillermo del Toro, nothing against him. He has a good eye for talent. The movie looked good. I remember the casting was okay, but that's it.
Yeah, you got Jessica Chastain. You got Niccolo from Game of Thrones. So, you know, you had a nice couple of stars in there. Hey, Andrew, what are your thoughts on Mama? Because I'm sure you've seen this.
Yeah, I've seen it, and you know, I align with Bernie. Like the visuals are great. It's a really well shot movie. The art direction's wonderful. You know, it's one of those kind of, it's, you know, that kind of mystical creature as well as some kind of psychological horror mixed into it. I mean, it's definitely for the season. You know, for Halloween season, this is definitely worth, you know, taking a look if it's in front of you. But you know, it's not notable enough to really kind of demand its own journey to it.
This is the excitement I have for Mama. And Andrew, as a horror fanatic, you'll appreciate this. You know, when they release Fear Fest, the schedule for AMC, and you see like Halloween 1 through 6 and the Friday the 13th. And then like you see what they air at like 2 a.m., which is some of that like really like more recent but not memorable horror. You see movies like Mama.
So pay attention, kids. All right. So now I'll ask you real quick. Is there, if you were to replace Mama in Virginia, does anything come to mind? Putting you on the spot here.
Nothing for Virginia. There's a movie that I would say is somewhat similar to Mama that I think I would recommend more, although I don't even think it takes place in the United States. The Babadook. I think that one is a really good example of kind of the spot that this movie takes. Just
so nothing to do with Virginia.
No, not at all.
Very nice, Andrew. All right, well, obviously with Virginia, we're gonna head to our nation's capital. Wait a minute, guys, do you see that guy on the side of the road? Should we pull over?
well, if these movies have taught us anything, is that we should always pick up hitchhikers.
Always.
You know what? I'm going to take a chance. I feel good about this. Let's pick this guy up. He looks very honest and trustworthy. I think we'll be fine. So I'll go ahead and I'll pull over. We're going to stop in Washington, D.C. and pick this next guy up. Everybody, I'd love to welcome our one of our great original co-hosts, Mr. Peter Charbonneau, joining us back again from a small layoff. He's back on the RV to continue this road trip with us. Pete, you want to go ahead and say hi?
Hey, everybody. Thank you. Wow. Whew. You can't tell you how long I've been walking here. It's not like the 70s. It's really hard to get picked up hitchhiking these days. So I really appreciate this. You guys are the best. I would just caution, I'm not sure where this whole van has been, but when you do get to Texas, I might be a little wary of picking up hitchhikers there. I've heard some things.
I've heard nothing but good things about it, so okay. I think we'll be fine. I think no, just don't take this personally, but we're just going to pat you down. So while we pat Pete down, let's hang out in our nation's capital because there's this little slightly known movie that came out that was kind of centered around DC. I'm not sure if anybody in the audience has heard of it, but I'm sure our three hosts here, our three horror experts, can shed a little bit of light on this next one called The Exorcist, I believe it's referred to. And Pete, as our hitchhiker that we just picked up, I'm absolutely going to start with you on this one.
Yeah, this is all about that 80s exercise craze. So you had like a lot of like hard bodies, like a lot of just like exploitation movies like that. And that's what we're talking about, right?
John Travolta, right? Jamie Lee Curtis, yeah. The Exorcist.
Okay, get us into The Exorcist. Yeah, so one of my all-time favorite film, not just horror films, but just overall films, because it was the one that really did a number on me psychologically growing up Catholic. So, I think as has been discussed in the past, I had a very creative very creative imagination. And I made I'll say a mistake. At the time, it didn't seem like a mistake, but I took The Exorcist out of the Wisconsin Library, the book, when I was, I want to say 14, and started reading it. William Peter Blatty, bestseller. Quickly realized that I would not be reading that book after the sun went down because I would literally be in my bed, like just waiting to be possessed by a demon. So that had a really horrible psychological effect on me. But then I saw the movie, and that was another one again. Early days of cable, it would be on. Me and my brother home by ourselves, our parents out for the evening, and again, just terrified to. That's when you would do on the old cable boxes that had like the slider. It would be like hovered on 23, which is HBO, and then you do like the quick. You'd zip it down to like 16 for Sports Channel to watch the Islander game. But then you like slowly creep back and see what was happening. And then when you were terrified, you'd zip it back down again. So that was my experience with The Exorcist growing up. But I was fortunate enough to live in DC for 4 years, which was an incredible experience. And I very much enjoyed it. And one of the first things I did when I moved there was to find the Exorcist steps in Georgetown, which is right at the edge of Georgetown, right near the Key Bridge, which takes you over into Virginia. And they are famous. Like, they are very steep set of stairs that a lot of people will exercise and run up and down to get their cardio in. And then at the top, you have the house that was used as the exterior, the famous poster shot of Max von Sydow showing up to perform the exorcism, and cloaked in the fog is there. It's not right next to the stairwell, so a little bit of trivia there. Like, in the film, not to spoil a 40-something-year-old film, but when Father Karras jumps out the window and tumbles down the steps, that would be physically impossible with the actual location. So a little bit of Hollywood trickery there, but yeah, I mean, I have a couple of more things to say, but I don't want to hog all the Exorcist talk, so I'll let Andrew and Bernie chime in on their recollections.
So Pete, before we move on to them, we do have to tell you, last episode we actually made our first official fan-to-fan rule.
Okay.
So just to fill you in, we are assuming that anybody that is listening to this most excellent podcast has seen absolutely every movie we will ever reference.
All right.
So we are not ever saying spoiler alert, because we're going to just tell it as it is, full bore. Everybody has seen it. They remember it just like yesterday. So who cares? No spoiler alerts.
I never said that.
There you go. We'll edit it out. All right, Andrew, talk to me about your Exorcist experience.
This movie is just such an incredible film.
We meant personal.
You to tell them about your personal exorcism. I'm sorry, are we not supposed to
Still
bring that
working
up?
on it. Not fully baked yet. Yeah, this film is just incredible. The first time I saw it, I had to stop it halfway and just kind of take a breather. It's, Bernie was saying on previous episodes, there's some films that you don't watch more than once. For me, I love this film. This film is incredible, and I rarely revisit it just because I've always wondered whether it's not, because I grew up Roman Catholic, and I always wondered if, just that kind of having all of that in combination with this film makes it more impactful, or it's standalone outside of that context, really does make it as haunting and chilling of a film. And I think it does stand on its own, but I've never actually had the conversation.
Well, I will tell you, as the resident in-house Jew, it resonated with me as well. It scared the crap out of me, probably the same way it scared you guys. And even in the religious overtones, absolutely, I felt all of that because I saw it when I was deep in Hebrew school and all of that aspect. So I got it. It didn't matter what religion it was freaked the hell out of me. And I that's one of those movies. I'm not the biggest horror fan, but The Exorcist is one that I have watched quite a few times. Max von Sydow being one of my absolute favorite actors. I know Andrew and Peter, you guys are big fans, and Bernie, I assume Flash Gordon is something you enjoy. Come on, you got to give it up for Emperor Ming. This is one of those horror movies that I absolutely love. Sorry, go ahead, Andrew. Can continue.
No, I mean, really, there's nothing I can say that really can, I guess, be to really showcase this film. I mean, if you haven't seen it, see it. If you haven't seen it in a while, watch it again. It holds up. It's just as powerful, just as scary as any, film made in the past 10, 20 years. It's a really incredible film.
Did any of you see when it was re-released in theaters? When it was like 10 or something years ago. There was a special release.
I did not.
I remember
the
if
only
it was around
re-release,
like a director's cut or what the actual, or maybe it was like the 30th or 40th anniversary or something. They re-released it in theaters, and it had like the spider walk scene that was cut from the original. So it had a couple of little added elements to it, but I went to see it in the theater just because I was born in 1972, so I did not see the original theatrical run. And I was very curious just to see how the theatrical experience would be like, with a house full of other fans in there. And still extremely powerful, extremely unnerving. All the things that it conjured up as a kid were still there when I watched it as an adult.
Bernie, what do you think? Talk to me about The Exorcist.
I can think of three things. One, Pete just reminded me when it was re-released and VHS was still prominent as far as like the type of media, Warner Brothers had released this really slick black clamshell case in commemoration of The Exorcist. And they did this with some of the more classic, Warner Brothers archive type movies. So I always remember that. And it did have at the very end of the movie, the spider walk scene and the short little documentary. And I remember owning it because The Exorcist is, if you get through, like, if there's like a Mount Rushmore of horror movies, I think The Exorcist is like in this own category of its own. And I don't know if I would put it in the same category as Poltergeist, but these other movies that have kind of, like my wife has seen The Exorcist, but she has not seen Nightmare on Elm Street. Like, she would not watch a slasher movie, but she would see Sixth Sense. Like, there's this fine line between thrillers and horror. And I think The Exorcist is able to play both sides of that. And that reminds me, the other part of it is I remember a girl I was dating many years ago talking to her mom about The Exorcist, and she had seen it when it came out in the theaters, and she had grown up a diehard Catholic. And at the time, I was just discovering film, and I remember having this conversation with her about movies that we now consider classics, like Jaws and Poltergeist and The Exorcist, and asking her, well, how was it seeing this in the theater? And I think listening to her talk about it made me realize that at a time when, not to be dismissive of faith or religion, but at a time where, that's maybe not as much connective tissue as we have now, just because there's other things in our society, that was a big pillar at that time, where you did have maybe more of a devotion to like the institution of Catholicism. So you did have the Catholic Church going against, like, talking about the act of exorcism, and essentially doing some like PR against the movie to try to not freak everyone out. And when she told me about that, that kind of put it in context for me, because it would take something big for like the Vatican to talk about now. They're not talking about like Annabelle 3, like, hey guys, dolls don't come to life, just letting you know, like, it's okay. But to hear that there was that piece of it, and the last thing I could think of with the movie, just not to belabor the point, because it is great. Like Andrew said, if you haven't seen it, you really should just stop listening to us and go watch the movie, because that will serve you better. But the one thing I always really appreciated in the movie is that clash in the clinical scenes where they're doing all of those tests, because this is a movie that brings in this we've talked about it in previous episodes, Andrew, when we were talking about like House and Amityville Horror, and the idea that you have this home which is supposed to be a sacred place, and here you have this young girl who's very innocent and like gregarious, and like, like she'd be like the perfect young sister, because she just seems like nice. And then to have this horrible, unspeakable supernatural thing happen to her, but then the foil of that is all of these tests that were made to look painful and intrusive, and the sounds that they make, I can hear those. I don't know if it's an MRI machine, but there's that part where like the bass kicks in really hard, and it's like doo, 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 doo. And whatever those machines are, which just look like archaic machines compared to today, but I think they just like reinforce the point that, like, man, like they're doing all these things to try to figure out what's wrong with her, and they still can't figure out what's wrong with her. And this poor girl has gone through all this. So there's that idea of also trying to bring science to the supernatural. And because it's set in a very like tight-knit mother-daughter relationship, I think those are all the things that make this movie transcend, because it's a good relationship that tries to tell you what the supernatural thing is. But when the supernatural stuff happens, like, it just kind of says, all right, we're going to lean into it fully, and you're going to watch this.
So here's my question. The Exorcist, just like just like Andrew alluded to, and just like all of you guys had, this is a tentpole movie. This is a crossover, so it absolutely fits in the horror genre. But so many people that were not horror fans were drawn to it, because whether it was the topic, the religious aspect, the what's the word I'm looking for, the sensationalism of it, or just split pea soup fans. That first movie, that original movie, has gone on and lived on forever. It's had 4 sequels, so to speak. Do you think this is a movie, and are the sequels worth anything? Do you think this is a movie that should have spawned, no pun intended, sequels? Anybody can take it.
There's an excellent, I can't attest to the sequels, but there's an excellent TV show that picks up in the same storyline as the original Exorcist. And I love the fact that they've made a hard break away from that original story, but still harken back to it, I think, in a very respectful way. And it has just the same correct undertones. And it's hard changing that format too from movie to TV, because there's a lot more story you have to tell. But I think that the struggle that's depicted inside The Exorcist is definitely something that can be kind of elaborated on and kind of revisited. But the bar is so high. Really, you have to have just the right team to come in to, really kind of pull that story a little bit further. Otherwise, it really kind of just all falls apart.
Yeah, and a
So
little correction. There were basically there was Exorcist 2 and 3, and then there were the prequels. Exorcist the beginning and the prequel to The Exorcist, starring Stellan Skarsgård. So those were the later ones. I guess they were pretty separated from those two sequels. And then there was that series that was a few years ago, 2016, 2017. Bernie, what do you think about the sequels, the prequels, the series?
So if I remember right, wasn't Stellan Skarsgård supposed to play the Max von Sydow character? So it was more of a prequel?
Yeah, those were prequels. Yeah, those two were prequels.
And they were basically the same movie, if I remember correctly. One was supposed to be directed by Paul Schrader. I can't remember who directed it, but it was going to be one movie. The studio didn't like it, and so they shelved it, and then they basically reshot it. But then the original one came out at some point later, because that's how things work these days, where everyone wants to see every iteration of the creative process. So I think they were technically supposed to be the same movie, but they were turned into essentially two.
That makes sense. Yeah, Rennie Harlin was the director of the 2004 one, and then Paul Schrader was 2005. So they came out back to back. According to Rotten Tomato, not well received in any way.
I was racking my brain. I was like, what sequels of The Exorcist were there that I missed? And the prequels. I completely they've been purged from my memory.
As they should be.
Right.
As the purge movies before you watch the Exorcist prequels.
Good advice.
I'll just say real quick to kind of button this one up. I think the original, it carries such weight that, and I think even William Friedkin's on record as saying that he didn't direct it to be a horror movie. He directed it more to be about, the struggle of faith and the psychological aspect. So I think, that kind of, to your point, Doug, maybe why it has been able to straddle that line. While it's definitely very much supernatural and horror, but there's that other element to it. And I think he kind of came at it from that place. And as far as the sequels, I think the Exorcist 2 is often considered one of the worst sequels of all time. So if you want to see that, then you can enjoy that for what it is. Exorcist 3, I think, has kind of gained some cult status over the years. It was directed by William Peter Blatty, based on his book Legion, which is it's not really a sequel. There are characters from The Exorcist in it, but it's not. The film is technically a sequel. The book was not. And it also contains probably one of the greatest jump scares in cinematic history, which I won't spoil more than that. But if you're interested in that, then you should check that out. And it was coming to a close literally a few days before I moved out of DC. The district announced that the Exorcist Steps was declared a national or a district landmark for cinema. And so I showed up there, and it was pretty cool. They had William Peter Blatty and William Friedkin were there at the top of the Exorcist Steps signing memorabilia and things. There was a really good crowd. You're then invited to walk down the steps for the ceremony, where Tubular Bells was played on a loop for, I say, a good hour and a half, which was just kind of bizarre as you're in, I think it was like, it might have been May, or maybe it might have been closer to fall, but it was a gorgeous fall day, sun shining, and then you just got like the creepy Tubular Bells playing.
Family friendly fun all around.
Yeah, of course.
Oh yeah,
always.
Absolutely. Well, Pete, I think you just gave us a future episode worst sequels of all time. I think we will absolutely have to dive into that. We must continue our road trip. There's a big country ahead of us. We're going to continue down south, and we're going to head to North Carolina to another slasher movie, Pumpkinhead. So, Bernie, why don't we start with you on the wonderful world of Pumpkinhead?
I think it's one of the forgotten movies of the 80s. And we talked about Lance Hendrickson in one of the previous road trip episodes, jokingly, mind you, where we brought him up because I remember him saying how some actors do certain movies to get a swimming pool or like a summer home, like Andrew said. And that's where we were talking about Jack Nicholson doing Wolf. in Pumpkinhead, completely not the case at all. Like, I think the special effects are almost as much of a main character as Lance Hendrickson, because some of the actual like practical effects that they're able to pull off, the mist, just like the overall tone of the movie, that gives you as much of an impression. It looks a little creepier, a little grainier than like Friday the 13th or Nightmare on Elm Street, which look a little glossier. But there's something about Pumpkinhead that's really neat. But again, one of the forgotten slashers, like, you know, when you think about Michael Myers, Jason Voorhees, Freddy Krueger, you know, Pumpkinhead is not that far removed on the list. Maybe he's a few down the line. He's obviously further down the line than Chucky, but somewhere in there, Pumpkinhead is very much, they've been throwing way too much shade his way. So I want to give him a little bit of credit.
And do we know the gender of Pumpkinhead? We know Pumpkinhead's a male, female? How does...
He's a pumpkin head.
Well, in the movie, the Pumpkinhead creature is a manifestation of the vengeance and anger of the father.
Right.
So I assume he inherits gender too. I mean, pumpkins are asexual, I think.
Yeah, they could be binary. They could be non-binary. To stick with current terms, Andrew, what are your thoughts on the wonderful world of Pumpkinhead?
Yeah, Pumpkinhead is a great creature feature. You know, the special effects, you know, like with Nightmare on Elm Street, there's, you know, movies where the special effects can either hinder the movie or really propel it. And I think a Pumpkinhead, I mean, even looking back now, there's a little bit of obvious scenes, but just like the ambiance that they have for the staging of everything, you know, the fog, the darkness, I think plays well with the creature too, and still keeps it pretty relevant. And the storyline, you know, it's not anything too complex, but, you know, I think it's good. You know, it's that vengeance play, you know, father's son gets killed by these dirt biking teenagers, which is, it feels very 80s when you're watching it. And then, you know, he basically goes to the local North Carolina witch doctor and gets Pumpkinhead to go after these creatures, and then after these kids, and then, you know, ultimately realizes the extent of his rage and you know, sacrifices himself to at least stop this madness of vengeance. So I feel like, you know, for creature features, it has a good kind of underlying just like a moral to it, which is rare for, you know, giant vinyl monsters chasing teenagers.
So Andrew, I have a quick follow-up. He went to the local witch doctor. Was that something you find in the yellow pages? I'm not sure.
Local witch. It was a friend of a friend, I believe.
Because we're talking 1988, so internet wasn't there yet. So you got to know somebody to get to the witch doctor.
It was the yellow pages, I think, or white pages. If he knew the witch doctor's last name.
Bernie, what are your thoughts on good old Pumpkinhead?
But besides what I said before, I think Stan Winston's directorial debut. I mean, we know him from like Terminator and Aliens. So again, I think Andrew hit it on the head. It's a creature feature. A creature feature that doesn't get enough love.
Pete, any comments to the pumpkin?
I don't have too much to add. This was one of those. I remember my cousin and I rented this. This was kind of, I don't remember when this came out, but and maybe Andrew or Bernie.
1988.
Okay. And Andrew or Bernie might know this. Did this have a theatrical release, or this one of those like did this go direct to?
It had a theatrical release, but it, like some of the sequels were direct to TV movies. I want to say, again, sorry, Sci-Fi Channel, I'm pretty sure I'm remembering them as direct to TV movies that were released on Sci-Fi Channel. And I didn't see those, but the original one was a theatrical release. Box office gross. Anybody want to take a guess? We played this game.
8 pumpkins.
Ooh, I'm going to go with a 10 million pumpkins.
10 million pumpkins. Pete, you got a pumpkin guess?
7.85 pumpkin pie dollars.
4 million pumpkins.
Wow.
Yeah, only 4 million pumpkins. And Lance Hendrickson, you mentioned it. You mentioned it earlier. You know, he was one that was pulled because he was in Terminator. So when you're having your directorial debut, what do you go with? You go with a sure thing. You go with somebody that you can rely on. And I think Lance was a perfect choice because he's one of those unsung heroes. He's been
he definitely has to hold that movie together. So I mean, definitely a great casting choice getting him for that. Yeah, I definitely remember enjoying it. As my cousin and I, that was the days where you'd go to the video store, and we were like sifting through horror movies, and once you get through the stuff that you'd seen 2 or 3 times, it's like, all right, let's give this one a try. Yeah, it was a good creature feature. And the only other thing that I have to add was that I recently saw on Twitter a behind the scenes shot from the making of it, where the Pumpkinhead, the guy in the Pumpkinhead outfit was all done up except for his feet, which were wearing high tops. And I think he might have been dancing. So you can track that down on the old interwebs.
I'm surprised there's not like a 1980s era MTV video, like Do the Pumpkin. Just saying.
Yo, MTV patch, as in pumpkin.
Ooh,
patch.
nice.
Oh, nice. Very nice. All right. Now we're going to continue south. I know you guys have been waiting for this one the whole entire time as we head to South Carolina, and you guys are probably going to have to cut you off on this next one. But The New Daughter.
Same as the old daughter.
The silence is deadening. The New Daughter. Pete, I'm going to give you 30 to 60 seconds on this one. What do you got?
Well, that's 30 to 58 seconds too many there, Doug. You're being way too generous. I have no clue what this movie is. I couldn't even begin to imagine.
Bernie, same question.
I will at least give anyone who's listening a little context. So we found this map online, and to be fair, the idea is that these movies are supposed to have a strong correlation to the state that they were in. We've covered like Carrie, Wolf, Night of the Living Dead, which is really big for Pennsylvania. Obviously, we just talked about The Exorcist in Washington, D.C. I had no desire to do any research for this movie because, as we said before, sometimes there's flyover states. Sorry for those folks. I think this is a drive-through state for The New Daughter. Andrew,
right, so
have you seen this movie? I mean, you have a strong horror legacy, Andrew. It's literally in your blood. So I missed anything to say.
I missed this movie coming out. I have not heard of it whatsoever, but because I'm a huge nerd, I did homework on it and watched it recently. And yeah, it really is not. It's a flyover movie.
Okay,
it's Kevin Costner, right? Yep. He has a daughter in the film. I think they say South Carolina during it. I'm pretty sure. And you know what? Like it's like an hour and a half, hour 45, and they spend the first like 2/3 of the movie dragging their feet. The last 30 minutes of the movie actually not terrible. Like it starts to pick up. It's sad that they started so late with the good part of the movie.
Okay, look, Andrew, I have to interrupt you here. I have not seen this movie. I had a guess it was Kevin Costner because it was just showed up somewhere along the way. And it came out around that time where you had actors. I think after The Sixth Sense, you had this, like, Kevin Bacon and Stir of Echoes, and I forget the movie that Sandra Bullock was in, where I think her husband dies in a car accident, and she's kind of like remembering that moment before he passed away, and she has like this premonition of what the life could be.
Oh yeah.
Okay, so
2 weeks notice or
White Noise with Michael Keaton. I love that movie.
And I think this New Daughter was like Kevin Costner's venture into like the supernatural horror world,
or the Waterworld royalties started.
There you go. Yeah. Having no context for this movie and since you've seen it, I'm interested to find out is the plot that it's kind of like what is it? The classic movie, The Pod People.
That's what I thought going into it. I was like, all right, there's going to be a new daughter. And like they spend the first 2 parts of the movie shaping up that the daughter's acting really weird and eccentric, and then like she starts doing things at night, like sleepwalking. It's like, all right, well, maybe not pod person, maybe more possessed. And then it kind of moves towards like they start talking about ants. I'm like, all right. I'm less confident about where I see this going.
Wait, insects or like familial? Okay.
And so it turns out
ants can have ants too.
Very true. It turns out that there is some sort of brood of subterranean creatures that have elected her to be the queen, and they come out of the South Carolina soil every like 30 years, and they picked this girl from this house that they thought was haunted, but was actually just perpetually trying to get the daughter to become a queen of these humanoid ants.
All right,
Wow.
we've already spent way too much time on the new daughter.
Wow.
So we've already spent. Do not ask one more question of this movie.
I have to clarify my statement of like the last 30 minutes being good.
Oh yeah, go ahead, sell it.
That has to be in context with the 2/3 of the movie I saw previously to that, because I mean Kevin Costner did not act in that movie. The kids did their darndest, God bless them. But I mean, then creatures start popping out of the house, and he's going around with a shotgun shooting them, going through the ant tunnels.
Does he act in any movie?
What was that?
Does Kevin Costner act in any movie?
Oh, I guess he acts like Kevin Costner.
He is Kevin. He's in the same genre. He's in that Tom Cruise genre where he's Tom Cruise in every movie. Just different sunglasses.
The credits did say Kevin Costner playing himself.
Okay,
got it. So he decided to be in this movie.
Man,
Andrew, I'm curious. What was the level of Costner accent in this one? Being that
it was subtle. I mean, it really hats off to him. He didn't try to overplay the southern location.
Is this a sequel to A Field of Dreams? I'm not sure, but I feel like it could be.
We're spending way too much time on this movie.
I'm just saying, after he builds the Field of Dreams, and all the ghost baseball players disappear, he realizes that he dug too far when he was making the field into the subterranean world of the ants. And then, of course, they have to send a representative to check out his daughter, a few years down the line, gets abducted, and they replace her in order to send her as the liaison to this new world in the I'm telling you, I think this is just Field of Dreams Part 2.
I would see that movie.
I'll help you with the Kickstarter. I think we only need like 5 minutes of Kevin Costner's time, so like $1,000, and we can just do we can edit 5 minutes in.
If you dig it, they will come.
To all those involved in the production of the new daughter, you're welcome, because your streams probably just went up by, I'd say, like 150% because of.
We'll expect our royalties.
Yeah, Netflix, if you're listening.
We absolutely spent way too much time on that movie, because what I was going to ask is, again, it's South Carolina. Obviously, I think we're all in agreement that is not the movie that should be sitting in South Carolina's horror slot. Do you guys have anything that comes to mind that you would replace it with? It would be sad to leave it there.
There should be some good Southern Gothic horror movie that takes place in South Carolina, but I'll be damned if I know what it is.
Man, I'm trying to find movies, not necessarily. Let's see. Gosh.
There's The Descent that takes place in Appalachia that I think we can just kind of give South Carolina solid.
We'll shoehorn that into the Carolinas.
Actually, I think I'll fight you on that. Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter.
Man, I lost. I'm sorry.
There you go. I think we. I know, Bernie, you said we got to stick to the map, but
wouldn't that be Illinois? Wait, where's?
Yeah,
no, he traveled around. Apparently, it was set in South Carolina. So
vampires will not be contained to one state.
He cannot tell a lie. Vampires cannot be contained.
All right, let's move on. We're going to continue south, and I think this next one may make up for it. Although, again, I'm going to defer to you guys whether it fits in the horror category, because my memories of it, and granted, I've probably seen this twice. I don't look at this as a horror film, even though it still scared the crap out of me. So we're in Georgia, and we hear the banjos, and we got Deliverance. So, Bernie, why don't you start us off? Is this a horror movie?
We talked about crossover movies like The Exorcist before. I don't know that I would put Deliverance in that category. And I won't have much to say about this one because I remember, again, my history was when I really discovered movies was in my first year in college, when I was able to go hog wild at the local video stores and watch everything And at the time, I don't know if you guys remember those 100 top lists that were released by, I don't know if it was TCM, but that's when I started to kind of see all the movies that I had not watched, like Casablanca or Citizen Kane, the movies that are considered to be, like dyed in the wool classics. And Deliverance was on the list for one of those movies. And I think I saw it to check it off the list. I don't have much to take about it. So Andrew, Pete, Doug, I'm going to leave it up to you guys.
Pete, what do you think?
Yeah, it's a great question, because I think you could have a really good argument either way. I mean, there's definitely horror elements to it. I'd personally never considered it a horror movie, just because I tend to think of horror as kind of, your slasher, that, something a little more otherworldly, or something that's like just slightly beyond like what you would expect. Not that you expect the events of Deliverance when you go camping and whitewater rafting, but yeah, I think
that is the horror in and of itself. Now, Andrew, I know we kind of talked about this off air previously, but you had something else that you were going to stick in to Georgia. What would you have put in its place?
Oh no, I don't think I have one for Georgia. And you know what? This is a little embarrassing, but I have not seen Deliverance. It has been
we were talking about Cape Fear.
Oh yeah, that's right. What am I talking about? I don't have anything. Yeah, Cape Fear.
Cape Fear was Georgia?
Was it Georgia? No, I think it might have been South Carolina.
The original one was Georgia.
With Mitchum, not with De Niro?
Right, the 1962 film was Georgia. So I'm looking right now, and all right, you ready? I'm going to give you some options to replace Deliverance. As great a movie as it is, it definitely, I don't think it fits into the horror genre. So we've got things like Swamp Girl.
Obviously.
Squirm.
Oh, that's...
Yeah.
The 70s schlock.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So that would fit. Night. Oh no, that's Night the Lights Went Out. I thought it was Night of the Leaves. Oh, wait a minute. What is it? I saw it. The Haunting in Connecticut 2.
Oh.
Ghosts of Georgia. So they crowbarred Georgia right into that one. And then Days of Thunder. That is definitely a horror movie, because it is scary every time you see Tom Cruise try to act. Sorry, that was my attempt at humor. I apologize.
That rings true, Doug.
Hey,
and then
racing ain't rubbing.
I don't think I can come up with anything. So I'm kind of understanding why they shoved it in there. I don't know if there's much that Madhouse. No,
there's two that I had to double check because I thought they were both in Georgia, and they're not. One is Slither.
No,
I think that's South Carolina, and then the other one was Get Out, which is actually Alabama.
Right. What about 2001 Maniacs? Anybody? Yeah.
Yes. No. Maybe.
I don't know.
3001 Maniacs or the year 2001.
That's the name of the movie. 2001 Maniacs. All right. So I guess Georgia might be our first real bust as far as having us.
The only comment I'll make about it, it's kind of like in the same world as Wrong Turn, which is probably the only time those movies are ever in the same category, or even Hills Have Eyes. That idea of like the backwoods locals that, take advantage of these people who are supposed to be civilized. And I think, it starts delving into issues of like classism and, this idea of the uneducated backwoods locals that forage and, are fighting against the vacationers who are coming from the big city in Burt Reynolds and Ned Beatty. That's the most I could think about with Deliverance. Does it mean it should be on the map? Probably not. But Doug, to your point, the fact that we're scrounging to figure something out, whoever put this map together, I'm empathetic, because there was probably, this was one of those, they went through all the states and they're like, I'll find something better for Deliverance. And they never did.
Yeah. All right. So we're going to, I think we'll definitely jump back into horror when we head.
I think I might have found a TV show. Oh, Jesus. Lovecraft Country.
Oh my God. Amazing.
Well, there you go. That's a whole episode right there. All right, so all right, so we can fill a couple things in, but Lovecraft Country definitely would fill that gap. And again, I think that show alone might be a future episode. All right, so heading into Florida, we're coming. Pete, we'll probably be able to drop you off because this is where you needed to go, right? So we're gonna drop you off with Jeepers Creepers. So, Pete, do you want to start us off with Jeepers Creepers? It fits the category.
I think I saw this in the theater. This is one of those when I was just going to the movies all the time just because I love the theater experience. So if something came out that was horror related, I probably went and saw it. But there were a ton of movies, including Jeepers Creepers, that just I'm like, yes, I saw it, but I don't really, I don't remember too much about it other than the kid from Dodgeball's in it, right? Justin Long.
Justin Long.
Yeah.
Yep. This is like the epitome of like MTV horror movies, where if you told me this was produced by MTV, made by MTV for MTV, that's what this feels like, because it's still a creature feature, like in the vein of Pumpkinhead. And it does try to do some of that backwoods, Wrong Turn, Hills Have Eyes kind of stuff too. But they do try to create a slasher, something that, is supposed to be in the vein of Michael Myers or Jason Voorhees. It's had a few sequels. And Pete, I remember too, watching this in the theater, because it was at a time when if it came out, like I would go watch it on a Tuesday or a Wednesday. I don't know that I would have seen this on a Friday on opening night. But the fact that it's spawned enough sequels feels like it's gotten some traction with someone. So Andrew, are you one of those people?
Yeah, I was one of those people, I guess, that wrote into the production company. I think it's a good popcorn creature feature. Like, don't have high expectations with it. It's it definitely something that you just kind of blast through really quick. I like the hybrid of creature plus like serial killer, and kind of mashing those two things and making this creature that's, I think, has a lot of things in common, like the Mothman, not the movie, but the legend of it, because there's this kind of cycle in which he comes back. He's basically harvesting people in order to extend his life, and has this elements of like a road trip too, and then it just kind of goes off the rails and gets a little creepy. I think it's just a fun like junk food movie.
It's got a couple of elements of like Duel in the car, right? Because he's driving like that kind of like just like exhausts, spewing thing, chasing people down
this
the highway.
Giant rust bucket with a "Be Eating You" as the license plate.
Yeah.
All right,
he's driving the car that like cuts off the guys in the first scene in National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation, where Chevy Chase is like trying to get ahead of that one car and then ends up going between the truck with the big trees, the lumber truck. Basically the Jeepers Creepers guy is the guy driving that. So there you go.
And like it's fun for horror movies to have some element of comedy and not really take themselves serious. And I think this one also does that. There's Justin Long is good at doing that comedic part, and like it's absent in the second half of the movie, which I think helps kind of emphasize the seriousness that it then takes. And again, not a high bar.
No, I will say though, the one thing I remember about that movie that I did enjoy was the brother-sister relationship. Like they did do a good job of the brother. I think he was picking up his sister, and one of them was going through a breakup, and you felt that this was a brother and sister, which kind of throws the curveball where you're watching a lot of these films. And to be fair, outside of the good ones like Exorcist, when you start getting into Wrong Turn or even Friday the 13th, which created some of these tropes, you can almost set your clock to, all right, and now the romantic interest will begin, and plot point 3, something will happen, and the final girl. This movie plays with all those tropes. There is a final girl, and there are all these things that do happen. But I always remember that brother-sister relationship was at least genuine on the screen, and maybe that's because Justin Long brought some of that comedic energy to it that didn't just make it like a bad actor. It's like, hey, he's actually a good comedic actor in not necessarily the best film.
Yeah, it did feel it felt refreshing, kind of, to throw away those tropes and not have any some sort of romantic cut scene where it's just this creature is going against all the people that are sinning. It's it's this unstoppable force like we've talked about with Jason and Michael Myers, but it's more kind of a natural force like predator and prey. And then the relationship that they have as brother and sister, it's really good because they're teasing each other. They're it enters in dialogues and dynamics that you don't normally see through the two lead characters in a horror film.
All right. Well, Pete, I know you I know you were going to get out here in Florida, but if you could hang out with us a little bit more and stay in the RV, I promise this road trip will end on a great note. So are you up for it? Are you willing to stick with us for a couple of states?
Yeah, man, I got some money for gas and some Slim Jim. So let's do a few more states.
I appreciate that. All right, we're gonna go somewhere, and I know there's been rumblings. So I'm gonna take this one to Andrew
I haven't
first.
eaten dinner.
We'll I think this next state will have some good food for us. So
Great.
we're gonna go to Alabama, heading back north from Florida. And Andrew, I'm gonna throw this one right at you. Laid to Rest is the Alabama horror movie, but you have issue with that.
Well, yeah, I think that I have a horror movie that just utterly displaces it, and that is Get Out, Jordan Peele's directorial debut, where it's just phenomenal. Like it's like M. Night Shyamalan's debut with Sixth Sense. It's just out of the gate going 100 miles an hour. It is such a good movie that reaches in different levels so many different audiences. Like it's that kind of undertone message that Romero has in his films that Peele is able to do with this film. And then outside of any of that, it's still just a tremendous horror film. It's a psychological horror, but still just spot on.
Again, it's one of those where I'm not the biggest horror fan, but love Jordan Peele. I didn't see it in the movies because I don't really go. Andrew, you've taken me to horror movies at the theater, and we've regretted it instantly. So I didn't go and see it Get Out in the theater. I did see it at home, and I instantly regretted not seeing it in the theater because it's as great. Honestly, I would almost say it's as perfect as a movie as can be. I think Jordan knocked it out of the park with his first movie. There was nothing wrong with it. The casting, I think, was spot on. The story just kept taking it up a notch. It went from 11 to 12 to 13. They had to crank that dial and rip the knob off every single time you thought you were at a peak. It just went another level and just freaked you out and took you places you didn't think you were going and places you didn't expect. That's what I really loved about it. Pete, what do you think? Because I'm absolutely Laid to Rest, Bama, gone. I am totally scratching that out, and it's all about Get Out.
Please, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I saw that in the theater. I was blown away. I'm like, this is just brilliant. Like it hits you on so many different levels with the dialogue and then the callbacks. As the film unspools and you kind of see what's going on and understand what's going on, you go back to lines and things that were said earlier in the film, and then you're just kind of like, wow, he was just operating on this on a level that you rarely see. Not just a first-time director, but people that have been at the top of their game for a long time. So I love this movie. Absolutely love it.
Yeah, and Andrew, just to kind of come back to what you said, where it's kind of like M. Night Shyamalan's The Sixth Sense. The Sixth Sense, I went back and I saw it again because once you know the secret of the movie, you want to go back and catch everything. With Get Out, same thing, except I saw it over and over and over again because there were so many, just like pizza, so many little nuances, so many little nuggets that you wanted to go back and pick up. And I love watching it over and over and over again. And it's got one of my favorite actresses with Kathleen Keener. She's just above and beyond the way she just sucks that role in and creeps you the hell out by being so cool and so calm and collected. And that, more than anything, that's horror to me. Is she just psychologically just gets into your mind and messes you up in every way. Bernie, I probably don't even have to ask. That other movie, we're not even going to talk about it. Get Out is our Alabama movie. What do you think?
Get Out is amazing. And final thought on this one, I think Jordan Peele inspired the director, or actually, no, let me correct myself. Jordan Peele was inspired by the director of The New Daughter when Jordan Peele went to make Us. And if you've seen the movie Us regarding the subterranean world, again, on a show where there are no spoilers, I think now there's a loose connection between The New Daughter and the ant colony people in the subterranean world and Us.
Wow.
I think that's the linchpin that links all of Kevin Costner's movies to the Jordan Peele universe.
We've been
The great
missing
thing
that.
about this podcast, folks, you don't even need to go on 8chan to get this level of connect the dots.
Checked.
Oh man. All right. And I know we could spend a lot of time on Get Out, but we're going to keep moving. We're going to head over to Mississippi. And with Mississippi, where are we at? We are with The Beast Within, a 1982 horror film. So Pete and I, 10 years old, Bernie, a little bit younger. Andrew, I think a thought with your daddy, but not there yet. So Pete, we'll start with you on this one, The Beast Within.
Yeah, this is like a nasty little number for a bunch of reasons. Not the least of which is that there is a cicada man rape sequence towards the end, which is, you know, not a phrase I really wanted to utter ever, but there it is, and it does exist in this movie. The thing that I remember about The Beast Within is, again, this was like early days of going to the video store to rent movies and wanting to rent horror movies, and this was the one. Kudos to the marketing team on it, because, and I even remember, I think the newspaper ads when it was theatrically released, which there's no way in hell my parents were going to let me see this in the movies, but it was something to the extent of, if you do not spend the last 20 minutes of this film like screaming, gasping, or jumping and running from your seat, you know, there's the whole, like, you know, it was almost like a Roger Corman, William Castle-esque kind of like draw you into, like, you know, like, well, I've got to see this now, like all the stuff that they're promising. And, you know, the movie itself is not very good. It's, you know, it's a creature feature ultimately. And it does have Ronnie Cox from
Deliverance?
RoboCop and why am I blanking on Beverly Hills Cop fame? Sorry.
Yep.
And yeah, it's, you know, it's got that gritty early 80s kind of film feel to it. So it's, you know, similar to like the early Friday the 13th, where like you feel like you are in the swamps of Mississippi while this movie is playing itself out. And, you know, it gets a little gory at the end. It's basically like the big thing is like the transformation on this kid who, I'm not going to remember all the details of it, but he turns into the cicada man at the end because it's like some heritage thing. And so like the end is, he's going through all these issues, and at the end he just kind of, it's basically just the camera is on him, and it's a lot of like practical bladder effects of his neck bulging out and his head splitting open and all these things. And it's one of those where it only happens in the movies, where like this transformation takes place for, I'd say, a good 5 minutes on screen, and like everyone in the room is just watching it happen. Like no one's taking any action. Everyone's just kind of like, oh wow. So it's a little silly in that regard. And so that's my memory. It's just one of those early VHS rental memories. And you know, like I said, unfortunately, it's got like that creep factor for all the wrong reasons. But you know, it's not a very good movie, but you know, there it is.
I don't know that you need to. I don't know that you need to stretch to wrap this thing up.
About it, bring it back to something that made some kind of sense, but there is no sense to be made.
Sometimes dead silence at the end of a statement is.
I am out of words.
There's something I forget. There's like a tagline for a comedy, and I forget. I can't. If you guys know what it is, it's like, in a year where a lot of movies are released, this is one of them. That's The Beast Within.
Yeah.
Do you have any memories of this, Bernie, that you want to espouse?
Not at all. The only thing I can think of, Pete, since you saw it, and having talked about Stan Winston before, it reminded me of The Fly. Was this a contemporary to The Fly? Like they were trying to, like, a creature feature before The Fly came out?
This is before. This is early 80s. So yeah,
Fly was what, 87, 88?
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, I don't know that this was, I don't know if there's any, I'm sure there is something out there that this might be comparable to that was done better. But yeah, this is, you know, like I said, this is like low budget, kind of schlocky. Just it's a really nasty, like, as the British call like these movies, video nasties when they get banned in the UK. There's like a nastiness to this film. Yeah, it was as a kid, like it was like a completist thing. Like again, because of the box and the advertising, I'm like, I have to see this. I can't believe what possibly could be so terrifying that that they're got this on like the cover of the box. But
suckered in by the advertising.
the only other thing I
Andrew?
can remember it was that I think it's based on a book, but the book was more about like a werewolf or something. And I don't know how. I mean, I'm sure there are people out there that know the history of this, how that became like let's take the werewolf and turn this guy into a cicada creature.
Oh, I'm sure the Beast Within fan sites are going crazy now, and we're gonna get hammered. We're gonna get hammered.
Are going to be all up in arms over this.
The way that you described the transformation reminds me a lot about American Werewolf in London and its incredible transformation scene. I haven't seen this movie. How would you even compare those two scenes together?
But that's interesting enough, Andrew, because American Werewolf in London and The Howling. So you've got who did American Werewolf? Was Stan Winston? I don't know. That was,
or is that Baker?
Yeah, Rick Baker did American Werewolf in London. Rob Bottin did The Howling, both of which came out in '81. So I think the same time as this film. But it's goofy. Like the transformation is more goofy. Like The Howling and American Werewolf in London. Like you can see like this is innovative stuff. Like this one, like I said, they're like these air bladders, just like puffing out, and it's kind of gory because I think they just put like a lot of like KY jelly on it to give it that like glistening, gooey, gross effect. But from a logical standpoint, like the transformation, you're kind of like, not sure someone's head should be that shape. A little.
All right, I think I'm calling time on this one. I think we've
dedicated. We've given this film way.
We need to get the hell out of Dodge and move ourselves back north, a little bit further north. We're heading up to Tennessee. This is one of those tentpole movies. This is one of those once in a generation, I think, type movies that just defines a genre. So Andrew, I'm gonna start with Bernie, I'm gonna start with you on this one, and then we'll move around. The Evil Dead. I know you have an opinion about this one.
I remember watching it. It was 19, and the reason I know that is because I was in my first year in college, and I remember visiting my girlfriend at the time and going, and I mentioned this in one of the previous episodes, there was a liquor store that one side served liquor, the other side was a video rental store. So the idea that you're going in with a false ID to get your liquor, but then you have to go with like your real ID to rent the movie. So freshman year, go there, the campus, bigger campus than the school I was going to. And we go to this video store / liquor store, and we're trying to find something. And we'd gone to the same high school, and a friend of ours who also went to the same high school was there. So we were kind of reconnecting, first year in college. And we just wanted to watch something more like in the background. Like we were not intending to really watch something. We just wanted to like catch up after a few months into college. So Adam, who was the other guy who was there, he's like, hey, let's rent Evil Dead 2, and Army of Darkness. And at the time I thought, you know what, like I haven't seen any of these movies. I'm not aware of them at all. And I'm there just to really hang out with my girlfriend, and Adam happens to be there. So we'll catch up. So that's fine. So we go back to I think it was Adam's room, and we're just talking about college and classes. And I noticed that I start watching the movie a bit more because I'm like, what is this? It's like, oh, it's the Evil Dead. Have you not seen this? No. When was this out? Oh, somewhere in the 80s. Oh, okay. Oh yeah. So now, we drink and party. Wait. So what's going on in this movie? Well, there's this guy, Ash, and these friends, and there's a sequel. Yeah, but it's kind of like a reboot. And what's this Army of Darkness? Is it just the same actor? No, you just got to see it. And I'm like, all right, well, I'm done hanging out with you guys. I'm going to start watching these movies. I remember that very vividly because that's what Evil Dead was to me. It was a new experience. I'd never seen anything like this before. I'd never heard of them. And then to be able to watch them back to back to back, like that was a treasure. Like that was amazing. So very vivid. And the movie itself, I mean, I know you guys will have a ton to say about this. And Pete, you've had some experiences in actually meeting Bruce Campbell. So you'll actually be able to talk about that a little bit. But this movie, I mean, to think about like the reboot that it's made, the TV series that spawned from it, it obviously has a very long, deep well in the horror community. And to be fair, you know, a lot of comedic elements that came in because of Sam Raimi, the director, being inspired by Three Stooges and slapstick humor. And I think that actually, if things like The Exorcist transcend because they're crossovers and they can do a little bit of thriller with a little bit of horror, I think that's what helps Evil Dead, is the fact that it's not a straight up horror film. There are comedic elements that makes it maybe easier for a not traditional horror fan to follow, because they could show it to other people and they can watch and say, oh, this is kind of funny, a little gory, but this is good.
I think before we get to Pete, I think we'll let Pete wrap this one up. Well, let's go to Andrew. Andrew, when did you first see The Evil Dead, and what did it do to you?
I first saw it in high school. A good friend of mine, Max, would basically share movies. We would, pull up, cult classics that we individually have seen and share it with each other, watch it. And this was him sharing with me, and this movie just immediately hit a soft spot in me, and has always been on my list of just that. I think it's in my top 10 list. And I really need to just give credit to the TV show, because I love all three movies. I like how they just lean into the camp for Army of Darkness and just wear it like a suit. But the TV show is such a wonderful blend of horror, gore, the frights that you have for the first two movies, the camp for the third movie, and it's just this masterful blend. And they have multiple seasons, and the seasons stack so well from each other. My heart broke when the season finale of the last season, and then to find out like a month later that they're not going to carry it anymore, because they have this wonderful springboard that they ended the season, the show with. That, oh man, I could watch another like 10 seasons of it.
Plus, you got Lucy Lawless and the $6 Million Man in that. I mean, it was just wow.
Incredible.
The TV series was amazing.
All right, Pete, give us your thoughts. You have met the man, the myth, the chin. Give us your thoughts of Evil Dead.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm trying to remember when I first saw it. This was another on-reel video rental with my cousin Mark, and I keep referencing that, but we rented a lot of horror movies together when we were growing up. So this was one. I'm almost positive we rented Evil Dead 1 and 2 at the same time. And again, this was before the internet, so we really didn't know too much about it, other than, again, like, you're drawn into the VHS box art. So we're like, okay, heard that this is supposed to be pretty good, so we got to get the second one so we can watch. Had to be before Army of Darkness came out, I believe, too. And so it was really interesting to watch 1 and 2 back to back, because as Bernie said, like, is Evil Dead 2 a remake? Was it just Sam Raimi with a bigger budget being like, okay, because, I mean, going back to the original, was it like Cabin in the Woods or something, like the short film that they made, which was like the prototype that allowed them to make Evil Dead, and then Evil Dead, took years and years to turn a profit, but then through the cult classic of that, Raimi was able to make Evil Dead 2. So it was like, I'm like, what am I watching? Because the first one's more straight horror. And then the second one, all of a sudden it's like, what's the Three Stooges? He's getting poked in the eye, and what's going on here? And the crazy camera. And when I first saw it, I didn't like Evil Dead 2 because I like my horror to be like straight up horror. Like, if there's, a joke to like break the tension type thing, I was okay with that. But like, the goofy bent to it, I'm like, I don't know. I don't know about this. Is this really, people are clamoring for this? But as I got older, obviously I appreciated it a lot more. And, and Evil Dead 2, I think is just a classic in its own right. But yeah, I mean, the first one, that was knocking down those pillars of too young to see these in the theater when they came out. And so the early days of VHS and going to the video store, or even before Blockbuster came on the scene, and just renting all this stuff and kind of catching up to my older cousins and, and the older kids in the neighborhood that would talk about these movies with like this hushed reverence. And you're like, ooh, like, I don't know what to expect, but I just know everyone's talking about this. I've got to see it. So yeah, that's
See, I'm surprised because your parents set the bar by taking you to go see Jaws in the theater.
which was
So what-
PG.
All right, I
funnily
guess.
enough.
Yeah. It's funny if it was reshot now, it probably would have an R rating. I think it would have skipped PG-13 at that point. But I'm
Yeah,
like,
it
they
was-
took
my
you to see
parents-
Jaws.
My parents were weird like that. Like they took me to see Jaws, but then a little bit past that, it was like, you can't go to see any rated R movies until I think I was like 14. I got my mom to take me and my friend to see Chuck Norris is Missing in Action, like where she literally bought the tickets. I was like, okay, go on in. And she went to go see something else. And I thought that was like the greatest thing ever, that we were in a theater, you know, and like, I remember some guy, this is completely off the topic, but what gives a shit? Some guy at one point in the movie just like yells out in the theater, like, kick his ass, Chuck. And me and my friend were like, this is the most amazing experience of our lives, right? I thought, like, nothing is ever going to top some guy yelling, kick his ass, Chuck, in in the theater.
And Pete,
for
wasn't
Missing in
that a Globus movie, right?
Yes. Oh yeah. Yep.
That's hilarious. All right, so you covered it. Evil Dead 2. That's where we're gonna let Pete off for this episode. We're gonna let him off in Tennessee, and he's gonna fend for himself at this point.
Yeah, I'm hearing. I just got a text that there's like some rats or something scratching in the attic back at my place. I'm sure it's nothing, but I'm gonna go home and check that out.
Just
But
keep in touch.
I'm sure it'll be fine. It'll be fine.
Let us know if you need any help. You know, if you hear any banjos, go visit Dollywood while you're there.
You've got
I'm sure that's not. There you go. All right, Pete. Thank you so much. We're glad to take you across the Great South and drop you off at Tennessee. And that's going to wrap up. That's going to wrap up this episode of Fan2Fan Podcast. We're going to continue this tour across the United States of horror movies with Andrew and Bernie. So make sure you follow up for our next episode here at Fan2Fan Podcast.